Do your players have the mental fortitude to do what it takes to play competitive baseball? Can they move up in the system? Can they move up to something greater? Today, we talk all about mental skills coaching and the organization and planning of coaching that can actually help you take your team to the next level. It's the Views from the Bucket podcast, starting right now.
Welcome to the best seat in the house. It's the Views from the Bucket podcast, where we dive deep into the world of coaching youth baseball. Whether you're a seasoned coach or just starting out, we've got the bases covered. Join us as we bring you the best insights, strategies, and stories from the finest minds in the game. We've got it all right here. So grab a seat on the old bucket and knock it out of the park with Views from the Bucket.
Welcome back to Views from the Bucket. I'm Chris Baker, your host, and I'm here with Josh Kozuch.
Yep.
Got it. Josh Kozuch, who is our guest today. He's a process and development coordinator with the Tampa Bay Rays and formerly a mental skills coach with the New York Mets as well. So we're super thrilled to have you, Josh, here on the podcast. Talking mental skills and mental approach to the game itself. I mean, obviously this podcast is all about youth baseball coaching and how we can make our players better and taking them to the next level. Tell us a little bit about what you do with the Tampa Bay Rays, Josh, to start off, and then maybe we'll talk about how that can dovetail into some youth coaching.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on here today. And I'm our process and development coordinator with the Rays. This is my 5th season with the Rays. Previously was with the New York Mets organization for 4 years. So been in baseball for a little bit. My background is in sports psychology, and that's a lot of the work that I'm doing with these players, is talking about the mental side of the game. What does it mean to be a process and development coordinator, though? I'm talking about the how-to behind things, how to have confidence, how to have an approach at bat, how to move on from a good game, a bad at bat, a bad pitch, being able to do some of those things, more so process oriented. You know, we talk a lot about trust the process, don't be results oriented. What does that actually look like? And that's what I'm helping our players and coaches do. And that's what our department is aimed to do here with the Rays. So a lot of conversations around that, specifically with players. When it comes to the coaches side, how to be a better leader, how to have difficult conversations, how to give feedback, how to organize a message. Those things aren't always necessarily talked about, but I think are important when it comes to coaching, right? Like, what is the message I want to deliver to the team? A lot of times you'll see coaches, not specifically in pro ball, but just in sports, where they'll have something to say to the players. Next thing you know, they're up there and they're talking to them for 10 minutes. They've covered 8 different points. The players are staring at the ground, staring in the clouds. And when they're finished, they're like, all right, you guys got that? And the players go, nope, didn't remember any of it. So we help think through some of those things and talk through some of that with our coaches. At the end of the day, our players and coaches, they're the experts at what they do. They wouldn't be in the positions that they are if they weren't really good already. So what we're aiming to do is work with them to help them just become the best versions of themselves on and off the field. So that's a very abbreviated version of what we're doing, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and I don't think we do that enough at the youth level, for sure. I mean, it's funny that you bring all of this stuff up as stuff you're doing at the professional level and throughout the Tampa Bay system, with both coaches and with the players themselves. Do you think from your perspective, I assume you played when you were younger, do you think from your perspective, we're teaching coaches enough skill around the mental skills of the game, or do you think we're just focusing entirely on drills and reps and things like that, and not getting the players prepared enough for the next level mentally?
It's interesting. I think the easy answer is to say, no, we're not doing enough. But I think you could say that about anything, whether it's the physical side or the mental side. Like, there's always likely more that could be done. There's plenty of books. There's plenty of resources out there for coaches to read or look into about the mental side. But don't think we maybe do enough when it comes to specifically like coaching it for the players. I'll say this, like I do think coaches are also mental skills coaches as well. Like a lot of times they have played, they've experienced something from the mental side, they have experiences to share. But it does ultimately help to have, somebody who went to school for some of this stuff, that's been around it, that can help coach you on how to develop a process for a lot of these things. And so, yeah, to answer the question, I think that it could be done a little bit better, of course. What does that look like? I think it's reaching out to resources. I think it's connecting with mental skills coaches in baseball, or Googling it, finding out information, reading about it, watching YouTube, like doing those types of things. And I think that's really helpful to help build out a lot of these programs. The one thing I'll add also is I'm seeing a shift in just how much experience players have with the mental side when they're coming into an organization. A lot of them have mental performance coaches or mental skills coaches individually. A lot of them at big time college programs, they have a mental skills coach that comes in once a month, twice a month, works with the team, sends them content, does these types of things. So like it's happening, and there's definitely a shift. I'll ask our newly drafted players, how many of you guys have experience? And if not all of them, 80+% of them have some sort of experience with this. To what extent? Well, that's where it's different. But I do think on the youth level, the more that you're having conversations about this stuff, and the more that you're talking about what does it look like to navigate failure, what does it look like to handle success, what does it mean to, okay, now you're getting looked at by college coaches, or you're going to these showcases. How do you handle that? You have a bad game in front of 3,000 people. What does that look like? Dealing with parents, teammates, social media, like all these things are, really, really real things that people have to deal with. And I do think we could do a better job as a whole of helping educate players and coaches in the youth landscape. But there's a shift, and it's happening. So jump on board if you're not already.
It's true. And you know what? I think it's funny because you brought up a couple of really interesting points. One of them being social media, right? Because social media is can affect players a lot. We had a team in our loop that we're playing in right now, a little bit older than the team I coach. I coach 12U. It was, I think, a 14, 15U team. Some Instagram video went out chirping other teams in the league. Was actually a former player, not even playing on the team anymore, but the team got blamed and the whole team got suspended, even though the guy isn't even on the team anymore. But it just goes to, and it got retracted once they discovered that, and the suspension was waived. But it's so interesting what players now have to deal with, even at the youth level, right? Like it's totally different. When I played, there was nothing but grandma screaming at the umpire behind home plate, right? Like that was the worst it got. And you were like, grandma, come on, like stop that, right? That was it. And that would frustrate you. That was the frustration. Then if you struck out or whatever, that was the other frustration. And we'll talk about that. But talk about what players have to deal with now today, and why that's so, how that affects their game.
That still happens. The parents in the stands, the significant others, whoever it may be, like I don't think that's ever going to go away. I'll speak to the social media piece. You see it before games, after games, guys are on their phones. Like it's just a part of it. The hard thing is to not get caught up in the negativity around things. It's great when, you had a game where you were 3 for 4 with 2 homers and you get to see all the highlights and you see this on MLB Pipeline or Baseball America and all these highlights. It's awesome then. But when it's not, well, it's not so great. Or you read the comments about like, oh, this guy isn't that good. How is this guy the number whatever ranked prospect in the organization? He hasn't done anything. And like that stuff starts to get to guys. So how do you balance that? What are you doing about it? A lot of times it's just delete the apps. The other thing I'll say about the social media side is I think it doesn't always allow us the opportunity to reflect on our outings. And that's a piece that I talk a lot about with our guys. Because if you're always coming in after a game and you're checking your phone, and I get it, like you loved ones have reached out. You want to respond to texts, calls, those types of things. But if you're just sitting in your locker and you're scrolling TikTok, you're scrolling Instagram, and you're doing these things, and you don't process what happened during the game, I don't think you're gonna properly learn and absorb like what happened. And what ends up happening is the next day. Sometimes we make the same mistakes because we didn't take into account or process the game that we just had at hand. And I really urge guys after a game, take 5 or 10 minutes and ask yourself a few questions. What went well? What did I learn? What do I want to do tomorrow? And I think that really helps guys yes, process the game, but kind of get out of your head a little bit and okay, now the game is over. I'm going to leave it here. And when I go home, I'm just going to be home. Then you can do your social media or whatever. That's fine. You see this a lot where guys are just in the professional space, they're up late and you just have these thoughts constantly running through your head. What if I get cut? What if I get released? What if I get traded? All these things. Well, a lot of that's out of your control, but what is in your control is being able to take that time, process it, leave it there, go home, relax as best you can, and get ready for the next day. So I talk about that a lot with our guys. The other thing out to that point of be released, traded, cut, those types of things, getting moved up, worrying about things that aren't in your control. And I think that happens a lot in any level, whether it's youth, college, high school, professional. It's so easy to get caught up in what's somebody else doing, or what's this guy doing, or what's this coach think about me, or what about this, all these things that honestly you don't have any control over. So I have a lot of conversations with our guys about stuff like that. So I would say those are probably the bigger challenges that are faced in the not only professional but all spaces and really all sports. So those are pretty common things that are discussed.
Yeah, it seems like it. And you brought up a couple of great things in there that I want to touch on. But one of the ones I want to touch on first is around mid-answer that you just gave there around the post-game stuff. Post-game, obviously social media, that can be one thing. I mean, even my 12U team has a Snapchat group going now for the ones that are allowed on it. Not all of them are, but there's 6 of them or 7 of them doing that, talking about the game, talking about opponents, things like that. But let's talk about post-loss dad for a second in the car. So you just mentioned some really great things that when you're on social media, you're not necessarily processing what happened in the game and all the different things. But we also both know that in youth sport, especially in rep and travel baseball, dad can be a problem too, right? And especially after the game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you go 0 for 4. Instead of getting in the car and yelling and screaming at your kid for going 0 for 4, what should parents be doing to sort of improve that post-game sort of debrief and help them process the game so they don't make the same mistakes as you said in the next game and the next game and the next game after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a big proponent of the "what did I learn" or "what did you learn" question. I think that's really helpful, especially as players start to get older. They have to be able to process the games themselves. If you're just coming at them like you did this, and wrong, well, more often than not, they know that. So that's not helping. So asking them, what did they learn? I think also just at the youth sport level, did they have fun? And I know it's simple, but I think you see this a lot in guys where they're not enjoying playing the game. And I think a lot of that is because they didn't enjoy it when they were younger either, because they were getting in the car and whoever, mom, dad, grandma, was on their case the entire ride home. I don't think that's always maybe the best time to have the conversation either immediately after the game. So I think taking into account how did he play today, or how did she play today? I think that's important. Is this the best time to have this conversation? Maybe you want to, but maybe your kid doesn't want to. And I get it. You're the parent, that's part of it, but have a little bit of feel with this, and also providing some grace to your son or daughter in that instance of hey, they know they didn't play well or they didn't. I'm going to give them 5-10 minutes and then we can talk about it on the way, or even asking them the question of hey, what do you want to talk about from the game today? And see where they kind of steer the conversation, I think goes a long ways. The other thing I'll add too is just sometimes silence. I think that's big. I think because kids know that they didn't play well, they're waiting for somebody to say something, or they're anticipating this this feeling of guilt and shame or whatever it may be, and just sitting in silence with it is okay sometimes. And then when you get home, hey, I want to talk to you about this. When's going to be the best time for you? Like, asking that question, I think, is helpful as well. Again, I know they're kids, and yes, you're the adult and the parent, but depending where they're at, and 12 versus 16-year-olds and 18, like, there's a difference of how to handle some of this stuff. But I think providing space, providing silence, the types of questions you ask, the tone of the conversation, all those things are important to consider when it comes to the post-game conversations. They're real, and it's not just youth. It's still happening at the professional level, where there's influences on them that are challenging. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you talk about the parent influence on the skills themselves. Parents spend time reteaching hitting when a coach has just finally gotten the kid to the level they need them to get. And then a parent jumps in and tells them some kind of tip, throws off all the mechanics, and away we go. We're in trouble again. It happens again right after those games, right? All those things and those conversations. We always talk about the 24-hour rule that we give parents. If you got a problem with me as a coach, give it 24 hours, and then you can bring it to me the next day. You should almost do that with your players, right?
This thing is something else that I've noticed comes up a lot too, is sometimes the coaches of the team aren't, yes, they're working with the players, but they also have people that they go to on the side. The pitching guy, the hitting guy, the defensive guy, the strength guy, the mental skills, whatever. And when the parents are paying for that person and they're working on something, and then they get to the game and it's a different coach and there's a disconnect there, that's tough. That is a tough conversation to be had, because you're paying so-and-so X amount of money to work on your kid's swing. And then you have the coach in the game that's saying, hey, buddy, like, do something opposite. That's hard. So I'd urge parents to have conversations with the coaches and with their side coaches of, like, okay, what are the key elements here that we want to be able to talk about in the game and translate back and forth? Because I think that's where a lot of stress comes from for players, and for the coaches. It's just, there's so many cooks in the kitchen that it makes it really hard for anybody to do their job. And when you add that to the player and they're in the box and they're like, I have no idea what to do here. I have no idea what to think, because this guy told me this thing and this guy told me this thing, and I'm supposed to go hit. I'm supposed to compete right now. I think that's really hard for guys to do. So if you have multiple coaches and doing those types of things, I think as parents, bridging that gap between the two is helpful. Now there's a way to do that. And I don't think it's, hey, I'm paying this guy, so this is what we need to do. I think it's bring the two together. It's not an easy thing, but it's something that's not going away either. And I think you probably have experienced it as a coach and have seen it. So you could probably talk to it just as much. But it's we see that in pro ball as well, where there's just, everybody's got a coach for something. And how do we do that?
Yeah, it is funny, because you do. I mean, I think on our team alone, there's maybe 4 or 5 players that have somebody they're doing private lessons with, or semi-private lessons with, or they've done some kind of, program on the side, pitching, catching, whatever it is. And let me ask you, do you think that as coaches now, like, I think coaching is very different than it was 10, 15 years ago. I think we had a lot more influence. I almost think that coaching has changed to more of a motivational thing only. I mean, we do the reps, we do the practices and all the different drills and things like that. But to some degree, we do have to kind of leave those players untouched a little bit, because they are dealing with somebody who specializes in it in a lot of ways. You don't want to mess that up, especially if they're doing a good job with them or whatever. What do you think coaches have to think about now with that? Like, is that something where we have to take kind of a step back to the private lesson guy that's doing this with the son or daughter, or do we still have influence in changing skills and things?
I think you still have an influence. I think where it'd be helpful as a coach is to just ask maybe you have to go through each guy individually. Do you have a guy that you go to for lessons? Yes. Okay. What are you guys working on? What do you want to have translate? What do you want me to pay attention to during games that's going to help stay in alignment with that? I think that'd be helpful. I think where coaches can really be impactful is just the basic fundamentals of the game. Like, where to be at on cuts and relays, where to go with the ball, talking the game and that side of things, and maybe staying away from the mechanics portion of things, because, man, like, just baseball itself has become, gosh, I feel like I sound old when I say this, but like, it's become so showcasey. I'm worried about how far I can hit the ball, how hard I can throw the ball. Like, guys don't know the little ins and outs of a game, and like teaching moments of, okay, this is a situation. What are we going to do here? I think those are ways that coaches can really have an impact with players, is on a lot of just the basic fundamentals that are getting lost, and in the youth side of things. So those two things. And then the third piece is just, honestly, like the mental side. So your process for being resilient, your process for like having a growth mindset, for being motivated, for having confidence, like those things. Yeah, that's where I think coaches can really make an impact. So it may not be the traditional way of coaching, but this also may be a better way of coaching. So it's all on how you look.
I agree. I agree 100%. I think that there's a lot of difference to coaching nowadays than ever before. I'm in Baseball Ontario here in Canada. I'm a coach developer, and so I do a lot of the coaching courses on different things. And all they ever do in these courses is come and say, teach me drills, teach me drills. Why aren't you sharing even more drills? I need more drills for my practices. That's what it is. And we keep talking about the mental approach. We keep talking about motivation. We keep talking about all these things in all of our courses. Even when we're teaching pitching, catching, hitting, we talk about the mental approach. We spend a lot of time on that nowadays, right? And less on the drills. I mean, obviously the drills, but you can go to YouTube and find the drills. You can go, that stuff is easily learned to come up with ideas to what to do in practice. What you really need to learn as a coach is, how am I going to deal with the different personalities? Everybody's really different. How am I going to deal with the fact that there's kids that have private lessons? How am I going to deal with the fact that there's kids that have the dad that you'd rather cut the kid than deal with the dad? How am I going to deal with all of these things? You need that as a coach almost more nowadays, don't you, than just the skills and the drills?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'd be curious to learn more about how you guys are doing some of that stuff, and how you're coaches with these tools, because that's really interesting personally for me, because I think that's really important.
It is, yeah.
But yeah, it's huge.
It is, yeah, and it really comes down to asking questions, right? And finding out what's bothering the players, what they think about their situation, what are they doing? A lot of times it used to be tell with coaching, right? And I think now I'm sure you would know that even better than I do, in everything that you're doing. So, let me ask you a question. Let me give you a dilemma. Okay, coaches, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you a dilemma that I have as a coach right now. So it's kind of like sharing a drill. Here's my dilemma. So our team has they're a great team, very, very successful in our loop. We're doing really, really well. We were 17-1 up until last week on the season, but we have one team that is in our league that we just can't seem to be. We'll beat them in a regular season, but when it comes down to, like, we were in a tournament, they were in the same tournament last weekend, and got to the semifinals, lost to them. And not just like we didn't get killed, but we killed ourselves. We kind of beat ourselves in the fact that the players all started making errors. And it was an error after an error after an error, and a single inning that kind of killed us in that game. Then we actually ended up having a game with them this same week in league play, and exactly the same story played out. Last year at 11U, same thing. It was almost the same team on, like, roster wise, but it was the same exact location. Exactly the same thing. Great. We were great. First place, battling them for first place. But every time we meet this team, it seems like the kids get scared. It seems like something happens mentally in their mental approach to the game. And we as coaches cannot figure it out. How do we get these guys to, like, they make errors, but they don't make this kind of level of errors against anyone else but this team. Yeah. So when you hear a situation like that and you think about those players, because it really is a player issue, it's not, I mean, we don't know what to do as coaches. We're baffled. What do you think is happening? And is there a way as a coach to help to curb that and help them face that team and that nemesis that they can't seem to get around?
Yeah, a few ideas. First one is acknowledging the elephant in the room of just, guys, like, we are struggling against this team. I think we all know that. And I think we can see that we're adding pressure on ourselves. to perform better or do more in these moments. Why is that? Like, why do you guys think this is happening? And just have a conversation about it and see what guys have to say. So I'm a big believer of just get it out there. I would ask myself as a coach, like, are we doing anything different? Are we adding stress or pressure in this environment? Maybe you're not. Maybe you are. Maybe you're having a pregame pep talk that you normally don't have before games, and guys are like, wait, like, why? He hasn't said anything to us all year. Why is he talking to us about this right now? That happens a lot. And as the pressure turns up, coaches feel like, I got to do more, or I got to give them this lesson, or I got to do that. No, you just maintain the same. So I think as coaches, are you still maintaining the same behaviors? Are you doing the same types of things? If the answer is yes, great. But I think as coaches, you can reflect on that. And then as players, okay, guys, we're a really good team, and we've made mistakes throughout the season. How have we responded? And how do we want to respond when it happens in this game? If we make an error in the first inning, if we walk a guy or walk a run in, like, what's our response going to be? Are we going to just crawl into a hole and say, here we go again, this is the same stuff happening just like last time we played this team? Or are we going to respond by saying, you know what, this is part of baseball, we're a good team, let's just get back to doing what we do? And that ties into the last piece that I'll add here of just like, what makes your team good? And if you can identify some of those things ahead of time, when you get into those moments where guys feel, I don't know, out of whack, or they're making mistakes, those are really helpful reminders of like, guys, like, we're a really good team. We do A, B, C, and D really well. Let's just get back to doing these things. Let's go up there. Let's see pitches. Let's work counts. Let's drive the ball the other way. Let's throw strikes, attack hitters, and get back on track that way. So those are some of the things that I would suggest. Is just like, address the elephant in the room. Check yourself as coaches. Am I doing anything more than I've normally done? Identify how we're going to respond, and then be able to say, like, what do we do well as a team? And I think, like, if you can talk through some of that stuff and have those reminders in place, it's going to give you a better chance to have success. Now, you may go out there and play them again tomorrow and make 4 errors, and you're like, gosh, like, what are we doing? But I'm hesitant to believe that would continue to happen time and time again. And then another thing I'll add is just like, talk about what it'd be like to beat that team. Because if they have been kind of that thorn in the side, like, sometimes you go into it and it's like, man, we can't beat these guys. Well, talk about what it'd be like if we did beat this team. How good would that feel? How do you guys want to celebrate? What do you want to do? Just changing that perspective a little bit. That can go a long ways with a lot of that stuff. So I know I gave a lot there, but pick one or two and kind of go from there.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I think what's really interesting in listening to you as well is you're kind of setting up the kids for life, even in those, some of those lessons, right?
Mm-hmm.
That big bad team might be somebody else in your career someday. So, it is amazing what sport can do to set kids up for life ahead. But that's great advice, and I love the idea of asking some questions about how they feel and that sort of thing, and what would it feel like to beat this team. They know, in our case, they know in the regular season what it's like, but for some reason, when it comes right down to it, in a championship game or even a semifinal of some sort, this team gets to them. So we'll have to try some of that for sure. But it's interesting, from a mental approach from an individual. And I know we're running lower on time here, but I just want to ask you, on an individual basis. So when you have a player, let's say it's a pitcher, they are having a great outing, but for some reason, whatever, they gave up a single this inning. And I brought this up in a couple of other episodes as well, because it baffles me as a coach sometimes, where you see a player gives up a single, runner was on base for maybe 10 minutes or 10 seconds or whatever, and you're out of the inning, never scored, and the pitcher comes back kicking the dirt, getting down on themselves, doing whatever it is, and you think, you didn't even give up a run, right? Like, what is going on there, do you think? And what is the conversation that a coach can have? You see this with hitters all the time too, kicking at the dirt, but they had a quality at bat. Maybe they moved a runner up, or they saw a ton of pitches, or whatever it is. They still ended up with a quality at bat, but they're still kicking at the dirt. What can we be doing as coaches that would be better, do you think, in those situations?
I think the first is to understand that just as human beings, we have a tendency to be negative. That's what we're fighting against in anything. whether it's the business world, the sports world, like relationships, it's really easy to focus on she said this or they said that or I did this wrong. That's just how we're wired. The basic fight or flight response, like that's as humans. So you're fighting against it as a coach. So understanding that going in is important. I don't want to say like look for one negative, find 5 positive things, because I understand like it's not always sunshine and rainbows and let's always be positive and do these types of things. So what can we do as coaches? Understand that it's going to be negative, but understand like what is their definition, that player's definition of success look like? What does their definition of failure look like? And helping them define some of that ahead of time. So then when there are those moments in a game, you can be like, buddy, you said that this is success, not giving up runs or whatever it is. You did that. Let's stay focused on some of that. Or maybe their definition of success is a quality at bat. Hey man, like you did that. Like let's stay focused on some of that. And I think our job as coaches is to help shift that perspective of a little bit, understanding where they're at and then what are we going to do about it after. So that question I'll ask guys is like, okay, you gave up a hit. What are you going to do about it? Or you had an at bat or it didn't go the way you wanted it to go. What are you going to do about it? And being able to have those types of conversations, time and place for it, of course. A guy just gave up a 3-run homer. Probably not the best idea to go out there and be like, hey, what are you going to do about it? Again, the timing is really important. But I think as coaches, yeah, you can kind of help nurture that positivity side of things. But I think more so giving them a different task or something to focus on instead. So it's like, okay, win this next pitch, dominate this at bat, whatever it is. Like, I think giving them something to chew on that's not so much that negative response or that negative result that they just had, and keep it task oriented, a cue for them, I think is going to be really helpful. So that's where I'd go with that.
Can it hurt a player to coach in game?
No,
rather than taking it to the practice.
I don't think so. I guess it just, I use this answer. I don't like it, but it depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on what's been happening. Depends on the timing. I'll say this, like as far as the work I do, I'm in the dugout during games with our guys, and quite frankly, I don't have a lot of conversations in game with the guys that are playing unless they come to me. So I take that approach, and I wonder maybe it's a little bit different in youth because there are so many coaching points that can come up. Now I'm not saying there haven't been moments where I've gone up to a guy and be like, hey man, like we got to flush it and move on here. Like you're carrying the same at bat, your first at bat's now the 8th inning, and I know you're still thinking about it. Like we got to move on. There's been moments that stuff has happened, but I'd say, again, it just depends on the situation. Depends on your role as a coach. I think if you're the manager, pitching coach, hitting coach, you probably need to have those conversations in game. Now, immediately after it happens, that's probably not the best timing. But again, it just depends on the situation, really.
Well, that's a good point. And it almost seems like what you're saying is from a mental standpoint, for the mental attack to things, you can coach in game, and you should, right? Because they might take it out there and it affects their defense, or might affect them on the mound at youth sport level, right? So for sure, from a mental side of things, and maybe leave the skill side of it, like you're not going to, move your hands up or whatever in the middle of a game and try to change their whole hitting approach. I think that's where coaches can sometimes make mistakes. Is here, do these 6 things. Sometimes it's the third base coach, move your hands up, eye on the ball, do all this stuff, and they're like, what? Like, they're standing in the box going, what am I supposed to do, right? So I think from that perspective, there is, maybe leave that for practice, but definitely from a mental perspective, you're right. I think you have to address it at the time in most cases, right?
Yeah. Again, it just depends.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, okay. So this has been great. Awesome. Thank you so much for the time you've taken to do this interview. It's been awesome. I think it's helped a lot of coaches already, once they've seen this, obviously, to really attack the mental side of the game. From your perspective, you're seeing a lot of young players come up. You're in the development system, obviously. One last message for youth coaches that would help you when you start to receive these players in the system.
Dang.
What is there anything you'd say to coaches that say, hey, if you do this, you're going to help me out a lot?
I've never been asked that. Thank you.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think what would be really good for guys to know is what makes them good. Like, who are you as an individual and as a baseball player? Like, I think understanding those things earlier is always going to be better. And so I think, like, yes, you're going to change as a person and those types of, you're going to change, you're going to evolve as a baseball player as well. But I think, like, having a really solid foundation and knowing who you are, what makes you good, and what you need to go back to when you're struggling, gosh, like, that would be really helpful. So that'd be my answer for that. And
That's a great answer.
Coaches could help with that. It'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we don't even talk about that stuff, right? As coaches, sometimes it's always about the negative or what's going on in the game or what. We don't ever necessarily say to the player, hey, this is what you really are good at. Like, your speed is top notch, top in the league, whatever it is, helping them to understand what's making them get to these next levels, right? I love that. That's a great answer. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time, and I know you're a busy man, and you're traveling and in a hotel even right now. So, it's probably nonstop for you. I appreciate the time you're taking to do this.
Thanks for having me on, and happy to chat about this stuff. If anybody's interested to learn more, feel free to reach out anytime. You found me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, like those things. So I love talking about this stuff and happy to help any way possible. So feel free to reach out to anybody anytime.
That's awesome. Yeah, Josh, you clearly have a passion for this and appreciate that you did this. So thank you very much. This is it for this episode of Views from the Bucket. For Josh Kozuch and myself, Chris Baker, I'm hoping you'll join us again in the next episode. But for now, thank you, Josh, for being here. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for being here on this episode of Views from the Bucket. We hope you've gained some valuable curveballs of wisdom and that they'll help you on your coaching journey. Remember, the diamond is where we shape not just players, but young lives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show so that we can continue bringing you the best in the world of coaching. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover or a guest you'd love to hear from, drop us a line. We're all about helping you become the best coach you can be. Until next time, keep that bucket of knowledge and passion overflowing, and keep inspiring young ball players to be the leaders of the future. Play ball.